You're listening to the Heart Lessons Podcast with me, Sarah Rieke. Real women, real stories, real faith. Hello, friends, and welcome to another episode of the Heart Lessons Podcast. I'm your host, Sarah, and I'm so glad to have you joining me here today. Today, you are listening to episode number 55, and my special guest is Autumn Miles. Autumn is an author and a speaker and a woman passionate about women's ministry, and she speaks bold and raw truth about where she's been and how the Lord has redeemed her story. Today on the podcast, we are going to talk about her testimony of being in an abusive relationship and how she was able to get out of it, how the Lord has been able to bring her healing, and what her life looks like today as a result. We also talk about her upcoming book, I Am Rahab, Touched by God, Fully Restored, which is just more about her testimony of being in an abusive relationship, escaping a relationship where there was domestic violence, and how the Lord has continued to redeem her story since then. What I love so much about Autumn's testimony is how she speaks so beautifully of God's goodness and of his heart towards women in a domestic violence situation. I think many times in these sort of abusive relationships, the women can just feel very beat down and very much like they are not worthy of love or worthy of a healthy relationship. And the Lord says otherwise. And you are going to find that theme all throughout Autumn's testimony. So I am just really excited to share her story with you. And my prayer is that it will encourage everyone who listens, but especially someone who is listening who finds himself in a domestic violence situation. I just hope that this can be a lifeline for you today. I do have a small disclaimer to let you guys know before I start my conversation with Autumn. Because I am so incredibly professional, I forgot to push record right away, right when we started. So we probably talked for, a minute or so before I remembered to push record. So I did do, the part where I say, welcome to the Heart Lessons Podcast. So good to have you on today. And Autumn said, thank you so very much. It's an honor to be here. And then I said, before we start talking about your testimony, could you please tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do? And so that is where we are going to jump right into that conversation. So I'm sorry for my mistake, my oversight. What can I say? Sometimes you forget to hit record. But here is my conversation with Autumn, jumping right in.
Yes, I am very passionate about the Lord and God changed my entire life one night at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I cannot stop talking about him. And that sort of comes out in radio shows and books and speaking and all that kind of stuff. But my core is just founded on the rock of the gospel of Jesus Christ. And I'm really passionate about the word of God. And I talk really boldly, and I think that's important for us to do in today's day and age, real boldly about the truth of God's word. And I really am passionate about faith and what faith can do and how it is really the pathway to miracles in our lives and God intervening and pleasing God. So I'm all about bold truth and raw faith, and I communicate it in whatever avenue that God gives me to do it.
Yeah, that's great. And you have several different places online where you share and podcast of your own. Is that right?
I do. I actually have a daily radio show that airs in North Texas. And then we podcast a lot of those shows because a lot of people can't catch our show every day at 3:30. So yeah, we have a podcast. I travel and speak, of course. I'm an author of a couple books. And social media, of course. Everybody's on social media. So there's lots of different ways that we reach out.
Well, that's great. And I know a week from the time this podcast comes out, you will be releasing your book called I Am Rahab, Touched by God, Fully Restored, which is basically your testimony of learning how God feels about you despite some really hard things in your past. Just a really beautiful story of redemption and what God can do in our brokenness. So I'm excited to point listeners to your book. I would love to know more about your story, Autumn. Can we start at the beginning with your first marriage? And how did you two meet, and what did the beginning of that relationship look like for you?
So I met my first husband when I was 15 years old. I was in high school. I was heading into my junior year in high school, and I really flourished in high school. Not academically, but I really loved people, and he actually had dated one of my friends, and I was always kind of interested in him. He was really good looking, and I don't know, there was kind of like a mysterious something about him that I was interested in, but got a call one night from my friend who had dated him and just said, "Hey, this guy wants to date you." And so I was actually dating like 5 other guys at the time. This is so bad. This is so bad, Sarah. It's like not even good at all. But, and I was like, sure, I'd love to date him. And I was like,
just join the party, really, is all you were just inviting.
Isn't that terrible? But I said, I got to make some phone calls first. And that's exactly what I just told you is exactly what I did. I called the other guys that I was dating and stopped all those relationships and to really focus on him. And when I was 15, we became, I don't know what they call it these days, Sarah, but
I don't know either.
Exclusive, he's my boyfriend, whatever. Mm-hmm. And things were great for several months. I remember thinking in the early days, like, wow, this guy, I hit the jackpot. He is out of this world. Like at that time, I really felt like he loved Jesus. He was telling me that. He would talk about God. My dad was a pastor, so that really resonated in my spirit and with my parents and stuff. And then we became sexually active. Hello. And everything changed at that point. And it wasn't immediate, but there was a gradual shift in respect. And so, I mean, he would tell me things like, all of a sudden one day I remember him saying, "You're stupid." Mm-hmm. And I was like, "What? I'm stupid?" Like that's really mean. And then it kind of graduated from there to where he was cussing me out on a regular basis, telling me I was fat, ugly, and everything in between. And that kind of cycle continued for several years. And I just kind of took it, once you're tied to someone sexually, this is why I'm super big on not having sex before you get married. When you're tied to someone like that, it does something to you mentally. Hmm. And I was really connected to him and had served the Lord and did all the youth camps and did all the, winter camps and all that stuff that was available at my church, shared about the gospel. And then I met him and stopped focusing on God completely and turned my complete focus to focus and worship him as my God. Mm. And, that got me several years dating a guy who had no respect for me. But then he asked me to marry him. When I was 17, I believe I was 18 when he asked me to marry him. And we were married 9 months later. And it's crazy, Sarah, like we had a wedding planner and she told me, "I don't think you should marry this guy." Wow. Like the guy planning our wedding, wow. The woman planning our wedding even saw this is not right. Like there's something off here. So that's kind of the beginning of really a lot that God has done in my life.
At what point in your relationship did you start to, I know that you said like when he started calling you stupid and cussing you out and all those, you were kind of like, well, that's not nice. But at what point did you realize, no, this is actually inappropriate?
Well, the crazy thing about, here's the deal, Sarah. I didn't know it was there was no term for it back then.
Right.
We didn't throw around this word, I'm getting abused, I'm like, whatever. It was, the bullying wasn't even a thing. I mean, we're talking almost 20 years ago. So,
right.
So in my head, all I thought was there's no way for me to classify what's happening to me. So I'm just going to forgive him and chalk it up to he's having a bad day. And that was my bad. I mean, my parents had a great marriage. They were married. They just celebrated 40 years. And I never saw anything like that happen in front of us. Okay, so this is how Satan gets into us. My parents always were really lovey and like they kissed and all that kind of stuff in front of us, which we love to see. But when I started dating my ex, in front of people, he was very sweet. It was behind closed doors that he kind of morphed into this different person. So in my mind, I'm thinking, well, maybe this actually happens. Maybe this is actually a thing. So I just kind of forgave him and whatever. Like that's kind of how it began in the beginning. But the more brutal the things that he would tell me, the more I would believe, because he told me that it was my fault. So he would say, if you didn't do this, I wouldn't be so mad. If you wouldn't act like this, I wouldn't have to say those things to you. If you wouldn't. And so I started believing that maybe I was fat. Maybe I was ugly. Maybe I am the cause of these things. And it puts you into this weird, twisted, brainwashing mindset that you are actually the cause of the abuse that is happening to you. And the way Satan works, he is the accuser of the brethren. He is the father of lies. So when we are fed a lie by someone that we quote unquote love, sometimes it doesn't feel like a lie. It feels like the truth.
Yeah.
And that's how sadistic abuse is. And so I carried that into our engagement, constantly giving him grace, constantly taking up for him. And I carried it into our marriage. And it wasn't until we were married for, I would say, 2 years that I woke up one day. We were watching a basketball game, and I had done nothing wrong. I had made him like something to eat, and I had got him a drink, and I was serving him. And we sit down to watch this basketball game, and he grabs my arm, and this is not dramatic. It's very anticlimactic, but he grabs my arm and he squeezes it as hard as he can. And it wasn't anything big, but that squeeze, I understood for the first time. I did nothing.
Yeah.
To do that to me. That it hurt. And I looked at him, I remember saying, that hurt. Why did you do that? And he kind of looked at me with no answer. And I realized in that moment, wait, all the stuff that this is not my fault. It was like that squeeze wolfed my brain. It was crazy.
Yeah. So after that point, what did you do?
Well, at that point, I mean, I was fully in, married for 2 years. Because of everything that he had said to me, I had somehow, Satan did not just have my ex lying to me. He was lying to me in relation to God. So that day I was terrified of my ex-husband, but I also along the way began to be terrified of the Lord. Because if this is what my husband's telling me, well, God must think that too. And even though I grew up in church and heard about God a lot, I didn't know him. Okay. And I think that happens a lot. We sit in church and we hear a lot about God. And we know a lot about God, but I started to realize I didn't know God at all. I just knew a lot about him, and I was equating that to a relationship when in fact I had never felt his presence. I had never heard his voice. I had never been spoken to by the word of God. I just knew a lot about him. Mm-hmm. And the stuff kept happening, and I remember laying in my bed one night at 3 a.m. in the morning, and I was terrified of God. I thought he wanted to kill me. I actually wouldn't even leave my house and go a couple miles because I knew that God was going to have me hit by a car and I would be
wow. Yeah.
I was terrified of sleeping at night. Isn't that crazy how Satan will also steal your sleep? I was terrified of sleeping at night because I thought, God's going to kill me in my sleep. So I'm going to stay awake. This weird thought process so he doesn't. And I would watch the late show, the late show, the late show. And then I would watch every infomercial that known to man. Like I knew everything about what was being sold those days. But it was crazy. And then out of sheer exhaustion, I would fall asleep at maybe 4:30 in the morning and get up at 5:30 and work 3 jobs. So one night at 3 a.m. in the morning, I had enough. I was terrified of God. I was terrified of my ex. I hadn't told anybody. I had got to the point where I'm done. I am so done. I can't do this anymore. I put on a brave face now for about 6 years. I've told everyone that he's this perfect guy. He's not. I've created this mess because I've lied so many times on his behalf. And I started just thinking about death, and death became just maybe a sense of peace for me. Wow, if I could get out of this and just be done, I won't have to deal with this on a daily basis anymore. And so I started sort of thinking about suicide and planning, okay, what do I do? But I was terrified of death at the same time. That's how messed up it was. Mm. And about that time, girl, the Spirit of the living God spoke to me. Mm. And he said, almost when the Spirit of God speaks to me, it's louder than a hearing. It's not a hearing, it's a knowing.
Yeah.
Your Creator speaks to your spirit. I mean, your soul has to stand at attention. And even though it was 3 a.m. in the morning and I was kind of out of it and planning my own death and super messed up, I knew that God intervened, and he said, do you remember me? And, of course I knew exactly who was speaking to me. I knew who he was referring to, the God that I had learned about growing up as a kid in a pastor's home. And it was like a flashlight. Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember me? Do you remember me? And that voice got me out of bed. 3 a.m. in the morning, I walked across the hall and I just stood there. I didn't know what to do with God's voice. I was like, okay, I know this is happening, but like, what do you do? Like, I don't know what to do. I was like almost intimidated by the fact that actually had intervened. And I saw a Bible in the corner of the room that I was in, which hadn't been opened in forever because I was terrified that God was going to tell me that I was going to die in Leviticus by some plague or something. I don't know. Like, I was horrified. But I had my wits about me enough to say, okay, if God's speaking to me, I know his word, he speaks through, I'm going to go grab it. So I stood with it in my hand and held it, and trembling, I offered a incredibly rebellious prayer. I do not believe in you. How could you let this happen to me? How could you let him treat me like this? At that point, I was even projecting the lies that Satan had told me on God, which is crazy because God in his goodness takes every accusation that we throw at him. And I just stood there and said, but if you just happen to be real, you have to speak to me, and you have to do it now. Now is the time. And so I flipped open my Bible to Psalm 91, that says, the last verse of that chapter says, with long life I will satisfy the righteous. And basically paraphrase, the righteous will have long life. And only God knew I was contemplating suicide.
Mm-hmm.
I was terrified that my ex was going to kill me. I was terrified that God was going to kill me. So with that one line of living water from the Word of God, it transformed everything about my mind. I was truly washed by the truth of God's Word. And that night I fell on my face and was humbled before the presence of the Lord. Fell on my face, defeated, stood up when the sun was rising, a champion for Jesus, and truly have been the same ever since. Just proclaiming his goodness and how he truly does see, and he's intimately acquainted with everything about us, the good, the bad, everything. So that's when I knew that what I was living was not of God. It was of Satan.
Wow. That's an incredible, incredible story. Just that the Lord spoke to you through that one single verse.
Yes.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So then what did you do after that? What was the next step for you?
So it's so crazy. I didn't know what to do. You know, I feel like people they struggle a lot these days with what do I do? And sometimes it's okay to sit in the awkward transition of I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
We're so quick to have an answer or to pretend like everything's perfect. And we're forgetting the humility of, listen, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I know that God is real. He is alive and he's going to lead me. And that's kind of where I was. I don't know. So I'm not going to do anything. I think we act way too quickly and we make mistakes based on impulse rather than truly the Lord leading. And so I decided, because I actually, for the first time in my life, saw that God was actually real, I decided to get to know him and not make any move in my marriage. So that's when I started to build my faith. I remember that next day, I could not wait to talk to the Lord. It was like my prayer time. I remember laying on my face for hours it was such a beautiful season in my life. And it's really the foundation that even our conversation today is built on. For hours, I would lay there and just talk to him. And I remember asking him, okay, I know you're real, but can you help me, help a sister out a little?
Yeah.
If you're with me right now, like your word says, have a guy with a blue shirt walk in to wherever. It was actually a gas station. If you're real right now. And then it was crazy, Sarah. Those words would come out of my mouth and I would see a man walk in with a blue shirt.
Goodness.
If you're real, God, would you have someone provide for me financially? And I was a waitress at the time. I would go to work and someone would give me $100 tip. I worked at Cracker Barrel, so tips aren't that good there, but $100 tip on the table. And I would be like, oh, Jesus, you're providing for me. So I had to build my faith little by little. And as I built my faith, my circumstances didn't change. I was still in a relationship with a man that treated me horribly. But I had changed. My approach had changed. The way I dealt with what he was telling me had changed. God was building faith in me, and he was also building courage in me to eventually say, I'm gone. So it was, let's see, about a year later that I actually sat down, and I write about this in the book Rahab. It's the very first chapter in the book. I sit down with my sister, and I look at her. She's invited me to go eat ice cream, and I love mint chocolate chip, and I talk about that just a little bit. But I'm eating my ice cream, and I look at her, and I just said, listen, if I turn up dead, look to him first. And she looks at me, and she's like, what? Like, because I had hidden it so well. What? And I said, I repeated it, and I don't know if he was planning on, I don't know, but that's how I felt.
Yeah.
In my spirit. And she actually never told anybody about that conversation. So I was like, okay, what do I do now? And one day I came to my parents and I just said, listen, this is what's happening. I can't live it anymore. I know that you'll probably be ousted from your position at church. I know that we're going to get a lot of pushback, but I believe that God wants me out of this marriage because of my safety, which wasn't a huge shock to them. And for years, I felt like they were going to judge me, disown me, because my dad was a prominent Baptist preacher in our area. And I knew where he stood on divorce, and he didn't. They looked at me with grace and they said, okay, we will support you. And so that was kind of the beginning of the end of that relationship.
In those months that you first encountered the Lord until you reached out to your family and told them the truth of what was happening, did you have more courage to face your ex-husband? Like, did that dynamic change because you had the Lord and you had a new confidence?
Girl, it didn't change. It did a 1,000% 180. I became a different person.
Yeah.
And, because it wasn't me relying on myself to save him. I was relying on God to save me. And it was such a shift of my thinking that if God can help, if God is true, which I know that he is because he revealed himself to me, then the Bible is true. So if the Bible is true, then Moses standing at the Red Sea and God parting it on his behalf, Joshua in the Battle of Jericho, David and Goliath, all these stories that I had heard in my youth actually happened. So if that God can do that, then he can do this for me and free me. And yes, it built my courage. It built my faith. It built my prayer life, which is huge. It built me. That year built me and gave me the courage to look at him and say, my actual exact words to him was, you don't have control over me anymore. I'm leaving. And I had a bag packed, and there was a little bit of an altercation, but I ended up walking out the door and left him for good. We separated a total of 4 times, and we actually went to counseling as well 3 times. The 4th was I filed for divorce. We went to counseling, and I tried everything, but it didn't work.
Yeah.
I would leave, yes.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like it was something that you needed to be released from completely. Yeah. So just praise God that he brought you to that place and brought you safely to the other side.
Yes, he did. He's so good.
So, how did you get from that point to your current family that you have now?
So I ended up leaving him. I went before the church elders and told them my story, and which my dad was the pastor of that church, and they ended up calling me before the church for church discipline because I filed for divorce because of abuse. And God was so really planting seeds that we're harvesting now of ministry and purpose in my life through that huge rejection. And I remember, sitting in this elder meeting and listening to the chairman of the deacons say, if you do this, if you file for divorce, if you don't rescind this divorce, God will never use you ever. Is that what you want? And my dad wasn't allowed to come to this meeting. It was so political, so wicked. And I remember in my spirit when he said that, I kind of glazed over and don't remember the rest of the meeting. But God spoke to me and he said, you know what? I used Moses. I used David, and he had an affair. I used Rahab, and she was a harlot. So God used Rahab, but God used all these people with mistakes. And I've chosen you not use you. I'm choosing you as someone that I'm going to use in my grander story. And so that really gave me courage to go to Liberty University. I went to Liberty University.
I went there too.
You did?
My husband and I, we graduated from there in 2007.
Oh my goodness. So my husband and I left, we were gone in 2004.
Okay.
That's so great. So I went to Liberty University, got immediately involved with the women's ministry there, and still actually go back there and teach every semester. Met my husband there, and my husband is like, oh my goodness, he is amazing, full of grace, so kind, the antithesis of what I knew, which kind of freaked me out a little bit when I met him. Mm-hmm. I'm like, you're not this good. But after 14 years, he is that good. He is.
That's awesome.
So that kind of transitioned me into the life that God has blessed me with now.
Well, I love that. Was it hard for you to like enter into a healthy relationship? I know you said at first you're like, is this too good to be true? I imagine that there were some difficult things that you had to overcome when you were trying to build this relationship with your current husband. What were some of those challenges that you guys faced?
You know, we still face challenges as a result. You know, sin has a consequence. Sin has a consequence. And that's why it's so important. And I have 4 children. My oldest is 12. She's a girl. Her name's Grace, which we named because of the freedom that God gave me. But sin has consequences. And when we first got together, I first of all, I didn't believe hardly anything he said. And that was something that I had to deal with. I talk about it in the book this way. You know, when Israel goes in to fight Jericho, and to march around the walls, God tells Moses something very amazing. He says, in order to take the land, you have to defeat your enemies, or they will be a prick in your eye or a thorn in your side in the land in which you live. And I had to start doing the work of dispossession in my life. I had to look at the fact that, listen, I don't believe anyone. That was a Jericho that I had to defeat before I could truly possess my promised land of marriage. I had to look at my past. I had to start identifying things in my past that are triggers that I struggled with because of the abuse that happened in my life. And I had to do the work of dispossession. And so one of those things was I didn't believe anything he said. Another thing is, you know, when you've been abused, you're kind of psychotically independent when you are freed. And as a woman, you know, sometimes that doesn't look cute, you know. So I had to realize that, listen, I don't have to do everything on my own and not trust my husband. I had to sort of break down walls, you know, that goes really well with my book, break down the walls that I had built up because of hurt in my life. So there were a lot of things that we faced going in, but there's still a lot of things. I mean, trying to become intimate mentally with my husband. Sometimes if he hits a trigger, he'll watch me put a wall up. If he says something, I'll immediately put a wall up, and he'll tell me I'm not him. And this is, you know, 20 years later, 17 years later. I don't like it when he rubs my arm because it puts me back. It's a trigger. It puts me back into that relationship. And so if sometimes he does it just out of, he's not even thinking. Yeah, I'm like, no, don't rub my arm. So even there's mental things, but there's also like very specific things that were done to me that led to things that were abused. And so we have had to do the work. I've had to do the work singularly of dispossession in my life, defeated a lot of Jerichos, and he's helped with that. So we can have a marriage like God fully intended it to be.
So when you talk about dispossession, walk me through like the steps that you go through in your mind. Is it basically just replacing lies with truth? Is that part of it? How does that work for you, like inside your head when you're working on that aspect?
That's actually one of my favorite chapters in the book. It's called "I Am Conquering," and I'll use the example of my church. I've been ministering for a long time. I've been up and running my own ministry for 8 years, but then even before that, I was traveling and speaking and stuff. And I remember in like 2007, 2008, churches would ask me to come speak, and I would speak to their women's groups, and then almost out of anger, I would say things. And these churches were precious. They had not done anything to me. They were amazing to me. And I started recounting in my mind, why did I speak out of anger when I was speaking to these women? It was weird. And the Lord revealed to me, it's because you haven't dealt with anger that you've had towards your previous church. And I felt so, it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. So I remember him illuminating that to me, and I got in the Word of God, and I looked over the story of Job, and the last part of Job was when God blessed Job when he prayed for his friends. And I sat down and made a list of like 37. There was a legit 37 people on this list that I felt as if I was mad at. And I was on the list. My parents were on the list. I don't even know why they were on the list. They were so supportive. My current husband was on the list because sometimes I felt like he didn't understand or whatever. And there were so many different characters I wrote down. And one by one that day, I said out of my mouth to stamp it audibly, I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. I forgive you. And that day, I did the work of dispossession. And now, since that day, in the 2007, 2008, now I'm able to go into churches with compassion rather than frustration, because the church hurt me. So I'm going to preach. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it.
It's crazy how dispossession needs to happen in all of our lives if we've been hurt. I know women out there are like, I want to be a great mom, and I want to do whatever that my mom didn't do for me. And sometimes we can find ourselves working out of a place of revenge on our mom that maybe wasn't the best mom, then focused on, truly being present with our kids, speaking life over our kids. And I'll tell women all the time, you've got to do the work of dispossession. You need to sit down and you need to forgive your mom for what she did to you. You need to forgive her of these wrongs that, she might not even know that she's wronged you. So there's a lot of areas in the world today that we need to focus on dispossessing some of these Jerichos that hurt has built, that sin has built, so we can actually truly possess the promised land that God has waiting for us.
So I know probably something that you have struggled with talking about, dispossession. I'm just going to assume that you had to face the question of why did the Lord let this happen to you? Because it was the result of someone else's sin and choices, you think, well, Lord, why couldn't you have stepped in? Why couldn't you have intervened and prevented this from happening? So how has your wrestling with that question come to light?
I still at times think about this one thing, and I have resolved in my mind that God is good, and God does good. And it's when sin entered the world that we were tempted, that Eve and Adam were tempted and were kicked out of a perfect world. So I 1000% know that the serpent tempted my ex-husband, and he fell to that temptation, as did I. So now that I've sort of reconciled that in my mind, I know that our God will make something that is our greatest weakness our greatest embarrassment, our greatest negative title that we put on ourselves. And if we yield, and if we say, it's yours, sift it out for your good, sift it out for your story, sift it out for your plan, he will transform that thing. And I really don't wrestle with the why, because I know that it was a result and consequence of sin. I wrestle with sort of with a lot of guilt of what I did to my family and entering a marriage that I know that wasn't godly. But he has truly done that. He has taken everything that Satan wanted to take me out and to harm me with, and he has flipped that thing. And now I'm able to project anyone that will talk to me, the goodness and the faithfulness of the Lord.
I love that. And I know part of your redemption of that story is that you get to pour into other women and encourage them to live boldly in their faith. But I imagine that it took some time for you to share your own story out loud. I know you traveled and you spoke to churches, but what was it like the first time when you shared your story? Was it hard to do?
Yeah, it was. On one hand, it was hard, and on one hand, it was easy because it was hard being raw before people that don't respect that.
Yeah, right.
Talk about you, gossip about you, whatever. It's definitely hard to do that. But on the other hand, I had such an urgency built up in me that I didn't want anyone to ever go through what I had been through, that I wanted them to listen to what I was saying. So there was a lot of dying to self when I started telling my story that had to take place, because there was still a lot of fear there against him, against the people that were involved in our situation. But the more I shared, the more I had women come forward and say, "That's me." One woman one night came forward and she waited. It was I was speaking at a conference in North Carolina, and she came forward and she said, "I need to talk to you, but I want to be the last one." And I said, "Okay." So I talked to, I have a line of people at women's conferences, and she was sitting in the back all by herself. And so when I was done talking to the women, I went back to her and sat down with her, and I said, "Okay, what's going on?" And she said, "Your story is mine, but I've been living it for 20 plus years."
Oh.
And she said, "And I'm still in it. And how do I get out of it?" And it was at that moment at that conference in North Carolina, I thought I was there to minister to them. And God's like, "You ain't here for them. They're here for you." And God started speaking to me and saying, this issue of domestic violence, this issue of mistreatment of people is satanic. And I want to, I've chosen you to bring good out of this horrible relationship evil that is happening, that a lot of people don't come forward and say. So I was able to help that woman, and it really charged me to keep telling my story, keep being bold about it. And God's really blessed that.
I love that. I feel like that's part of, like, everyone on this planet is broken and has had brokenness in their past, but part of the way the Lord redeems it is that we can share stories. So I'm just so thankful that you are willing to use your story to benefit other women. I think that's incredible.
Thank you.
I know, well, based on your book, I Am Rahab, the story of Rahab in the Bible brought so much comfort to you, just realizing that the Lord used this woman. And there's a really interesting part of your book where you talk about the history of the fact that her profession is what allowed her to be able to help Joshua and Caleb. So can you tell us about that? Because I think that's really interesting.
Well, I studied a lot about Rahab. This was not like I think I'll write a book about Rahab and I'll do it in 2 days. This process actually took me 3 years.
Okay.
I was I remember one day I was reading the story of Rahab, and God, I was at my desk, and God clearly said, "I am Rahab, write it." And at that point, I had been I'm like a Bible nerd. Like anything, like, oh my goodness, they used 8 lamps. What does that mean? I have to know right now. Or, there's like a feather. What does that mean? And biblical times, like, I love numbers. Oh, okay. So what does 17 mean? What does 18? What does 11 mean? So I've always been sort of a Bible nerd because every little piece of the Bible is a piece of God. And so when I was reading the story of Rahab that day that God said, write it, I was studying the time of year. I was studying the fact that it was harvested flax that she just so happened to have drying on her roof. My thought was, why is she driving it on a roof? Is that how they did it there? Where in the city was her house located that she could dry flax on a roof? I'm obsessed with the detail. And God brought me to the fact that she was a harlot. And a lot of Bible scholars have tried to take harlot out of her name because they want to sanitize the truth. She was a harlot. She paid people to have sex with them. That's what she did. Okay. Some people say she's an innkeeper to sanitize, because it can be translated, to sanitize the fact that she was a harlot. Us religious people that's been in church forever, we don't like God choosing a harlot. It just didn't fit with our narrative. And yet he did it. And as I was studying sort of, why the spies were allowed in, for them to come to any other house, it would have been weird. It would have been awkward. It would have been, unique. But Rahab the harlot, there was a lot of men that came and frequented her house on a daily basis, on a weekly basis. It was just a part of her job, and the whole city of Jericho knew it. So it was never questioned at all. So even in her horrific occupation, God was utilizing that as something that he was going to use as his story. And there's lots of little details in there, but I just find that fascinating that even as a harlot, you think of a prostitute, you think of how they interact with men. She wasn't intimidated by the men, they were who frequented her house. She knew how to speak to men. When she talked to the king's guard, she knew how to twist the story. And she lies, and I write a whole chapter about the lie because no one wanted to confront that lie, and I did in the book. But she knew how to talk to men in a way that they would receive. And so really her occupation of a harlot gave her qualities that the spies needed in order to be hidden. It's a really fascinating story, but that's just a couple of things that I found.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. And not only did she help the Israelite spies so that they could, move into the promised land more easily, she was also included in the line of Jesus' genealogy. Mm-hmm. And so I just think the Lord did not shy away from what she was. And I just think that's beautiful. I just love that.
One of the things about just specifically the genealogy of Jesus that blew me away, Rahab married a man named Salmon, and they had Boaz. And I was just so fascinated as a matter of fact, when God gave me this point, I was calling everyone to be like, oh my goodness, isn't this incredible? I have a phone stream of people because I like to preach to everyone I know. When I was sitting there and I was reading, okay, so Rahab married a guy named Salmon. They had Boaz in the bloodline of Jesus. I started thinking about Boaz. And, do we not give Boaz so much credit? Wow, he's amazing. The kinsman, and he was Ruth's kinsman redeemer, and it was a foreshadowing of Jesus Christ. That's all very, very true. But I felt like our Christian culture has highlighted Boaz. Single women are I'm looking for my Boaz. I've been looking for my Boaz for whatever. And, it's just very much a part of our culture. And we really look at him as a hero. And he was. But we forget, and nobody talks about why he was the way he was. And if it wasn't for Rahab's constant drilling in his mind that God forgives, God is faithful. You look at people with eyes of grace. As he was raised, I don't know that Boaz would have been as gracious to Ruth as he was. How we are raised really dictates a lot of times how we interact with other people. And I couldn't help but think that it was because of Rahab that Boaz was the way that he was. And it was very interesting that Jesus, who was in the bloodline of Rahab, is also filled with grace, compassion, forgiveness. So directly in his bloodline, a descendant of Rahab, Jesus was, he also has those qualities that Boaz has as well, and is called kinsman redeemer. So I was really fascinated by that. We are missing a step in the Christian world and the Christian culture if we highlight Boaz, but don't actually give credit to the source of what was taught to him, probably from infancy.
I've never thought about that before.
Yeah. It's fascinating.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, just to think, like, as a mother, what do I want to pour into my child? What do I want him to be? And Rahab had the same mindset. So, yeah, that's great.
It's even with, God knew that Boaz was going to marry Ruth, and God knew that Boaz needed to be raised by someone that was full of grace. And so he, in his beautiful, specific planning, put Rahab as his mom. It's fascinating. It blows my mind to look at the heart of the Father and how he operates so specifically,
Yeah, no, that's so good. Okay, well, I just want to ask this as we sort of start trying to wrap up the podcast. I know we're getting close to our time, but for any woman listening who is struggling in a domestic abuse situation, I would love for you to just give her a word of encouragement, and then also just a word to her community, hopefully a church community around her, how we can step in to help.
Let me start with the church community.
Sure.
I coupled and I partnered up with Lifeway and did a study. The beginning of 2017, it came out about domestic violence in the church, and anyone that's a ministry leader, a pastor's wife, anyone that's listening, that study is really, really important because it shows that, 50% of churches are prepared for someone to come forward with domestic violence, in a domestic violence relationship. And that's just not good enough. 97% of pastors believe their church is a safe haven, but only 50% are prepared. And I saw that statistic and it frustrated me because I'm like, why are we not more prepared? But that's why we did the study. So I have put together 10 steps, and you can get them on autumnmiles.com to help churches get prepared for someone to come forward with domestic violence. You can't truly be a safe haven if you have no idea what to do when someone comes forward. You can have a heart for the woman, but someone that is being beaten, potentially her children being beaten as well, they need more than that, okay? They need some steps to help them get to safety. And that's on my website, autumnmiles.com. And I love our precious pastors that have been so supportive of this study. We've got some amazing men and women leading our churches today. To the woman, I would just very plainly say, first of all, I love you. I don't know you, but we're soul sisters. And I understand the fear. I understand the bondage, the mental bondage. I understand how you feel like you can't leave, but yet you can't stay. I understand that. I understand the great transition. And I would say to you, first of all, you need to get out, but I want you to plan it. I want you to put a date on the calendar. I want you to pack your children's things. I want you to pack your things. I want you to make that a concrete date And on that date, at that time, I want you to do exactly as you have planned and do not look back. I want to tell you that there is a God that is not intimidated by what you've gone through, but rather he is right there to intervene, to give you the courage, to give you the stability, to give you the strength to follow through with what you need to follow through with. Because let me tell you, let my life and what God's done in my life be an encouragement to you. He intervened when I surrendered. He intervened when I said, you know what, God, you got to help me. He intervened at my most darkest moments, and he is the same God for you as well. So I want you to make a date. I want you to leave. You must get involved in a church. Get that Bible out. Learn the compassion and the true character of God, not from what someone else says, but from what you study yourself. There is a God that will help you just as he helped me. I am not the exception. I'm the rule when it comes to the Lord.
Amen. Amen. You just brought tears to my eyes. I've never struggled with this, but I can imagine how hard it would be, and just to feel like you're alone. So just encouragement to any woman who is listening, who is in the middle of a domestic violence situation. Just listen to Autumn's words and be free.
Amen. Yeah.
All right, Autumn. Well, there are 2 questions that I ask every guest who comes on the show. As the Lord is leading you in the story that he has written for you, what's a heart lesson that he's been reminding you of lately?
Lately, oh my goodness. There's so many. I feel like every day I'm like, he's still working on me.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's me too.
I would say right now, there's several that I'm sort of dealing with and just being reminded of. But God is for us, even when we're not for ourselves. And I think sometimes we can get sort of bogged down by life, and we can look at what is on our plate and we can say why this is too much, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not equipped enough, or I didn't have enough schooling, or whatever. And God is for us even when we're not for ourselves. And that might sound cliche, but it's something that as I release books and as, people sort of come at me and, you get the trolls on social media and you get the negative comments and stuff like that. Sometimes you can actually think, wow, well, maybe I do need to do that a little bit better. And God is standing in, he's saying, no, I'm for you. I'm in heaven. I'm shouting over you with joy, according to Zephaniah. I am cheering you on, even when you don't cheer yourself on, and even when others don't cheer you on. You don't need them. You need me. So that's one of the many things that he is really telling my spirit right now.
That's good. That's good. All right, last question, Autumn. What is something that you're looking forward to?
Oh my goodness. I'm looking forward to this book, Changing People's Lives. I'm looking forward to going on the road. I'll be traveling, and I'll get to meet a bunch of people that follow along and are so sweet. So I really like to connect, not virtually, but like in person, hug people, squeeze people. I actually am writing another book. So that one hopefully will be out before too long. I'm really looking forward to that. I'm just looking forward to be utilized by the Lord and the opportunities that surrender gives. So yeah.
Love that. Where are you going? Like when you're on the road, where are you going? East Coast, West Coast, all over?
I'm going all over. I've got a lot of events set up on my Facebook fan page. They'll be putting them up, but I'll be in Florida and New York City. I'll be in Indiana. I'll be in Montana. I've never gone there to speak before. I'm so excited.
That's awesome.
I'll be in South Carolina. Just lots of places in the next couple of months, but we're so excited.
Very good. All right, Autumn, well, where can we find you on social media? How can I point people your way?
Autumn Miles, anything. My Facebook it's got a lot of meat on it. We do a lot of videos and stuff like that. Instagram, we've kind of ministried up in the last year or so. So there's a lot of encouraging stuff on there. But Autumn Miles, Twitter, although I don't use Twitter very often because Twitter is brutal. People are brutal on Twitter.
I know. I had one and I didn't understand it. And so now I don't have one.
No, it's like, oh, you guys are mean. But I do have it. And then, of course, my website, autumnmiles.com.
Oh, yeah, very good. Well, Autumn, I just can't thank you enough for your testimony and for what you are doing for women and advocating for them. And just praise God that He brought you out of what He brought you from and is using you in the way He's using you. And I just thank the Lord for women like you in the world.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for all you're doing and for getting the word out via this podcast. And God bless you. God bless your ministry. We're going to pray blessings over it. My team and I will.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Autumn. You have a good afternoon.
Thank you. You too.
Autumn, thank you so much for your boldness and for your willingness to share in such a raw way. I know so many women are going to benefit from everything that you shared today. Just your honesty and your transparency. And just how you speak of the healing that has taken place in your life from the difficult situation that you came from. So just thank you so much for your testimony. If you are listening and you are in a domestic violence situation, if you go to my show notes at sarahrieke.com/podcast, there will be a list of resources to help. I know we talked about Autumn's curriculum that she developed, and so there will be a link for that. But I'm also going to put a link to other resources that her assistant recommended when I reached out to her. She said these are some of her favorite resources for women in domestic violence situations. And so you will be able to find all of those there. And I hope very much that they will be a help to you. I want every woman listening today to just know that the Lord does not think less of you because of what your past has been, because of what you're currently going through. His grace does not discriminate because of your past. I know Autumn and I talked about even Rahab, whose occupation was being a prostitute, the Lord had a place for her in the line of Jesus. She had such value to the redemption story of the entire world. And I just think that speaks volumes to any of us who feel unworthy of being used by the Lord. And that's not to equate what you are going through with, having the occupation of a prostitute. That's not what I'm saying at all. Simply that the Lord does not discriminate against your past with whether or not He can use you in the future. You have worth, you have great worth, enough that Jesus Christ died for you and God has written an amazing story for your life. And I just hope that you believe that today. Autumn's book, I Am Rahab, releases 1 week from today. It will be on shelves on August 21st. You will be able to find out more if you visit autumnmiles.com. All right, friends. Well, here on the Heart Lessons podcast, I'm going to take the rest of August off to just spend some time with my kids. And we go back to school on, I guess it's September 3rd, whatever the day after Labor Day is, that will be when we go back to school. So I'm just going to take a couple weeks and just enjoy my kids. And I'm hopefully going to be on the couch a lot watching Netflix and snuggled with all my babies under a big fuzzy blanket. That's my favorite thing. So that's what I'll be doing. That's what I dream of doing in the next couple weeks. We'll see how it goes. The podcast will be back on September 4th with the series Living With and Loving Others Well, just as sort of a back to school to just get us on the same page of working with new relationships, meeting new people. I just thought it would be a great thing to focus on, just living with and loving others well. In the meantime, you can find me on Instagram. I'll be kind of exploring this theme of what it means to rest in God's promises. So everything that you'll be able to find will kind of be on that theme. And I would love to interact with you if you want to find me there on Instagram, Sarah_Rieke, and we can continue the conversation over there. All right, friends. Well, I know that you found this episode today to be so inspiring and encouraging. I know I was. Autumn is just a dynamic speaker, and I just loved having the opportunity to talk with her. And I hope very much that what you heard today was very inspiring and very encouraging to you to help you walk well in the story that God has written especially for you. Bye, guys.